Those involved with this research project acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we live, grow food and work. We pay our respects to their ancestors and descendants, and we keep present the ways in which Indigenous cultures have walked our planet for thousands of years in truly sustainable ways. Fair Food Futures, engaging civil society and policymakers in transforming food systems. Food injustices in Australia. Inequitable access to food is a significant problem in Australia. As a country, we are striving to reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, one of which is zero hunger. Despite this, 1 in 6 Australians are currently severely food insecure. This means that they have trouble finding the money for healthy food, they go hungry because of financial stress, or they can't access culturally appropriate or nutritious food in their neighbourhood. At the same time, 40% of edible food is wasted between the farm and the dinner table because of problems in the current food system. In Australia, there is no national level food policy, and 60% of the food system is controlled by a mere 5 companies. This makes our food system highly inequitable and susceptible to shocks. It is the most vulnerable populations that suffer the most. 1.2 million children in Australia are food insecure, as well as 32% of Indigenous peoples living in rural areas. The good news, community fair food networks are bringing about food justice in Australia. Community fair food networks include urban gardens, buyers groups, farmers markets, school kitchen gardens, food charities and more. These organisations work towards food justice, which means equitable access to food that is sustainable, healthy and accessible for everyone. This is different from the food security approach, which focuses on producing more food without necessarily considering the impact on people and planet. There is a vibrant community fair food movement in Australia, with over 150 fair food initiatives in the Brisbane region alone, over 500 nationally, and this movement is growing. The Fair Food Futures Project. Researchers from the University of Queensland conducted a national level study to explore how Australian community fair food networks envisage and contribute to more just and sustainable food systems. Using qualitative case studies and future scenario building, this project explores the visions, strengths and challenges involved in community food networks and translates these into recommendations for policy and legislation reform. Fair Food Futures brings together over 100 people from small farms, community food organisations, food charities and social enterprises, as well as local government representatives, food justice advocates and policy experts, to design a series of fair food future scenarios. Each scenario is a vision of food justice and how to get us there. Let's explore each scenario. The long table. In this scenario, everyone has a seat at the table and we have achieved zero hunger. Food is healthy, local and affordable, and policymakers understand that reducing hunger goes hand in hand with reducing poverty. Food movements successfully combine with other movements such as climate justice, gender rights and Indigenous sovereignty to create a fairer society. Social housing, schools, hospitals, community centres and prisons all have their own gardens that produce healthy and often free food for those most in need. Food consumption has shifted away from private market mechanisms like large supermarkets towards cooperative models like community markets and bulk buying groups. Food charities have moved away from redistributing food waste towards a focus on healthy consumption, dignity and enjoyment. They have joined forces with other social movements to advocate for systemic solutions. Everyone now enjoys a sustainable diet. Fair food in the city. In this scenario, food is a common good. Communities are reclaiming the commons by expanding sustainable food production in cities. Broadacre crops and livestock are still based in rural areas, but fruit and vegetable production now takes place in the city. Fruit trees, herbs and vegetables are grown in unused urban spaces, on verges, in parks, backyards and balconies, and of course in community gardens and urban farms. Governments, businesses and communities work together to establish local procurement policies. Council regulatory barriers have been reduced or removed to facilitate this shift. Food waste is valued as a source of important nutrients to be returned to local soils. As food quality increases, people buy less and very little is wasted in the home. Community waste management solutions, such as local compost hubs, make it easy for all residents, even apartment dwellers, to avoid sending compostables to landfill. Youth, food and climate action. This scenario describes a future where young people are educated, empowered and involved in determining the future of food. Healthy local food in this scenario is produced by young farmers who enter farming and remain in the sector with the support of schemes that improve land and resource affordability. Young people have also become a powerful driver for ethical consumption. Vacant and publicly owned land is used for food production and revegetation, particularly in urban spaces. Private and government ownership of land decreases, and collective ownership models with Indigenous sovereignty and land management practices at their heart become more common. Young farmers are at the forefront of more ecological food production practices, with a shift towards agroecological methods, small-scale farms, local production, closed-loop farming, and the growth of resilient and climate-appropriate crops. Technology for the people. Technology is created for and regulated by the people. Rather than having to abide by the expectations of large retailers, farmers have the power to set their own standards. Many choose to sell directly to consumers or via localised and often digital distribution networks, especially in smaller towns. Distributors still have a role to play in cities, but their power in setting prices and standards is greatly reduced. There is some role for global supply chains, but there is better integration of local and global solutions via human-scale technologies. First Nations people are more closely involved with technological development of the bush food industry and benefit directly from this growing field. Technologies and their IP are openly shared, free to affordable, and are accessible to all, regardless of citizenship. Technology and innovation are transformed into a common good that fully supports a degrowth economy.
The Fair Food Futures project found that different futures are possible for achieving food justice. As a signatory to the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Australia has to report progress to the United Nations. How can you help this progress? Contact your local representatives, policymakers and industries to bring about progress toward fairer food systems. Reach out to the government departments responsible for building a national level food policy in Australia and connect with projects championing change in the food system. You can directly support local food by growing it in, say, your community garden or buying from local producers. We can also improve our fair food advocacy when we work in partnership with human rights, environmental and Indigenous movements. We all have the power to bring these scenarios to life. Let's start building these fair food futures together.